So here are 7 plyometric movements that all beginners should be doing. So we're going to break down these 7 plyometric movements into 3 categories. We're looking at capacity, reactivity, and rhythm. Let's get into capacity. So when we're looking at putting together a program and where this would actually fit, this will roll pretty perfectly in terms of how you'd slot it into your program. So we're going to start with a capacity lens. We're going to start out with a basic bilateral movement. And what we're doing here is we're providing you the ability to be able to do a lot of these landings. You could do this 2 or 3 times a week, and you could be using 2 to 3 sets. And here I want you to focus on doing sets of 20 to 30 of these, but they're going to start in more of a lighter, more rudimentary form of movement. So check this movement out here. So bilateral movement, a simple leaping action, or you might see it termed as a pogo leap. You can do these on the spot, or you can do these moving forward. And what we're trying to do here is just build up a capacity for you to deal with a high plyometric volume and to be able to do more of this stuff more frequently throughout the week. Research tells us that the more landings we can get in and the more we can build up to more higher intensities, the better it is for us. So this second movement for our capacity piece is what I want you to do is an isolated single leg movement. What we often see is when people are moving on one leg, they're doing like a hop, they're using this free leg a lot. So what I try to do with beginners is isolate it. So we're going to take that leg away, and these sets might be 15 to 20 reps instead of 20 to 30 like the bilateral versions. But what we're going to do here is we're going to try and be rhythmical, a little bit more reactive, and we're going to try and build in some single leg volume here. Now obviously you've got to make sure that you do the opposite leg as well. There's going to be maybe less sets of these per week because it's going to be a little bit more intense for you. But here we're starting to build in even more dynamic strength and capacity because it's that much harder doing that on a single leg. So you're not going to jump as high, it's not going to be as reactive, but this is quality work here. So the final piece for this capacity part is going to be using bilateral movements multi-directionally. And the reason why I want you to do this is because your sport and just life in general is not up and down on the spot. We have to start building tissues capacity to land laterally, to step backwards slightly, or to break and return energy in a different direction. So those multi-directional movements might look as simple as we'll leap bilaterally forward, but then we also might go backwards. We might turn and move laterally, and we might even then move backwards and forwards, changing that direction of momentum. And what we're trying to do here really is get as much of that in with beginners as possible. So what you could do is if you're doing more on this multi-directional stuff, you can lay out, let's say 4 or 5 different light rudimentary bilateral movements. And throughout the week, you want to spread them out, and you might do a movement forward, you might do it backwards, you might do it laterally, and then you might add in those changes of direction in there. This is going to give you a real versatile ability to move in different directions and a great starting point to then start to level up how much force you can then handle when you move in a multi-direction. So this next stage is looking at the reactivity lens. Now reactivity is very specific to the level of intensity that you're trying to impart. So with all beginners, we've got to start with this low rudimentary level of force. The first part is reacting to the ground, and that sounds crazy, but we're going to use movements that are going to make you be more reactive. Okay, so we're going to start off with like a split exchanging motion. So the limbs are going to exchange back and forth, and what this does is it creates this ability to want to react to the ground with this small exchanging movement. So we're just going to do this on the spot to start with. These sets can be between 10 and 15 here, so they're dropping down from that capacity part because we want to maintain the reactive element. So a split exchange. Now, my job is to try to react. Every time that back leg comes forward, I'm trying to hit the floor. Now, over time, that becomes a little bit more of a higher version of that. But to start off with, those beginners are going to want to start with more of a lighter, more rudimentary movement. And until you can maintain the faster ground contact time, or how long you spend on the ground, until you can maintain that at each level, you shouldn't progress your reactive work. People often get that really wrong. They want to try and impart more force, which is great. They jump higher, they get more eccentric force when they come down. But they're not as fast on the ground. So when you're doing reactive work, focus in on the contact speed and how fast that element is. So the next reactivity piece is what's classed as more like a max RSI. And an RSI is the reactive strength index. It is an index that determines how reactive you are with regards to how much force you can handle. So you can take your flight time and divide it by your contact time and you'll get an RSI score. What we're doing with this one is a creation of reactivity here. So I'll use something like a line, or I'll drop down a plyomat and that will give me my reactive strength index here. But I find a line that I can use as my marker to hit. I'm gonna hit this and propel myself up as high as I can. And it's like a push and punch up. I use around a foot to 18 inches of space into that marker, and I just punch and pop. And you can see that as I'm rolling forward, I want to gather to then get into that position where I punch it up. And what that does for me is I'm not sinking into this movement at all. I'm really maneuvering myself in and I'm ready here. And that shows that I can be reactive out of more of a pushing action and the creation of energy. If you wanted to, you could play with doing this with a broad version, like a simple broad jump, but use that little leap in. And here what's quite good is that you can gradually build up how much energy you want to punch into it. And if you take the reactive strength index every time that you maybe record this or measure it on a plyomat or a jump device, then you can see that maybe if I push too much, I spend too much time on the ground. So we want to make sure again that the reactive piece is fast on the floor so that we're able to create that force reactively and not more of a slower, strength-dominant form of it. So our final piece for the reactivity section is looking at reactive deceleration. Now, it might be that you see a lot in sport or in training that people are decelerating into deep angles and pushing out. And that's fine, that's needed at higher velocities. But I love to teach people how to be reactive and decelerate together, because it's a pretty unique set of skills to have as well. So there could be short and sharp opportunities where you need to return back to a spot. So we're gonna use what I call like a 1, 2, 3 and react. So I'm gonna stand on the spot, I'm gonna find an area that I want to hit and be reactive at to then return back to this initial spot. So all I'm gonna do is 1 or 2 little leaps on the spot, I'll jump out, react to that spot and then return back here. And again, my goal is to be as fast as I can be and maintain how far in and out I'm coming. I don't want to push too far forward and never get back to that point. Okay, so here we go. So it's 1, 2, 3 and react, 2, 3, react. So it can be as many leaps as you want on the spot, it doesn't really matter. What we're trying to focus in on is this part here. You could do it back and forth if you wanted to. That's just what I class as like a pendulum leap. But I think it takes away how much emphasis I want to place on the speed and velocity of getting in and out of that decelerative movement. Now, as you kind of progress out of being a beginner, this could progress to being further out in terms of how far you've got to return. But I'll always say that contact time is important and traveled back distance is important. I don't want to be leaping out to here, but only returning to here. Super important parts there. And then you're progressing into a single leg could be the next step up for maybe getting into more intermediate forms of this movement. So when we're looking to program some of this together, so if I wanted to put capacity, reactivity, and rhythm into my training, that is actually how I would tend to sequentially put that in a training session. So let's say today you are going out to do some dynamic work. I would always start with getting that capacity and reactivity work in first. The rhythm stuff can come in second, and what I like about that rhythm stuff coming in later is often it's the case that we take away you trying to push too hard. You're maybe a little bit more fatigued, so now I have to think about rhythm. I now have to think about how I put things together, how I control it. Now obviously, because you are at a beginner stage, it is the case that we're not going to be killing you with enormous amounts of volume, so that we are going to get to the rhythm part and you're not going to be super fatigued. Like if you're really neurally depleted by the time you try to get to rhythm stuff, maybe that's when you start to rein it in. So I would suggest maybe coming in, the capacity part, you could do 2 or 3 movements. The reactivity part, again, 2 or 3 movements would be perfect. And then you're gonna finish off this plyometric session with, let's say, 1 or 2 rhythmical movements, which are gonna be of more of a higher volume, because I like to get into that rhythmic aspect of movement, try and find that groove, and that is how I would piece this together. So, movement 7. Finishing off, we've moved through capacity and reactivity, and we're now on rhythm. We're gonna use one movement here. We're gonna use a unilateral movement called a bound. We're moving from left to right to left to right. What we're gonna do here is we're gonna use around a 15 to 20 landing set. Now I've only got maybe 6 or 7 landings in here as the example, but what I want you to see is the rhythm and the level of effort that comes with it, and just seeing how relaxed I'm trying to make myself. I'm also still trying to be relatively reactive, but the exertion of output isn't crazy high here. It needs to be controlled, and it needs to be in a sequence where you start to, number one, you'll hear boom, 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 boom. That is that sequence that you should hear. You should feel the rhythm, and it should it should just get easier and easier as you move along. Now, whether you're using a single arm shift or a double arm shift is irrelevant. Just find what is comfortable for you. So here's the set of bounds. I'm just going to take a couple of steps in and so finishing off with those bounding actions, I think with the rhythmical piece, like I mentioned before, 2 or 3 sets is going to be really valuable here. You want to be able to get into a bit of a groove. So the first set might not feel that great, but the second and third might start to feel better. And actually, if it even takes a 4th set, then I'm not too mad at you for trying that. Ultimately, we're trying to keep the level of intensity down. So if you know the plus plyo system, you should be moving between a light and a medium tier intensity. If you're really, truly new to this and you've never done any movement before like this, start with the light stuff. Really rudimentary. Think just bounding over your ankles, and the medium stuff is maybe bounding over your calves. That pickup, slightly bigger, you're starting to lengthen it out a bit more. Now, when it comes to the distance of each bound, they should all feel relatively the same. All the contact should feel the same too. And that control and rhythm in your posture should be really centralized here. I should be able to have a conversation with you whilst I'm doing those bounds. So that is the rhythm piece. I think you should be doing that at least twice a week, if not 3 times if you are a beginner. And the rhythm stuff is really where your money's made in terms of moving better with plyometrics. So 7 plyometric movements in 3 different sections there. We have the capacity, we have the reactivity, and we have the rhythm. Those are your 3 main points that you should be focusing on throughout the week. Now, whether it's in 2, 3, or even 4 sessions, you can just spread it out. You can get a few of each movements in each of those sections, and I think that you have got a fantastic plyometric program there to use and make you a better mover, more dynamic, more explosive, and an all-around better athlete. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.